It says he's muted from this side.
It's coming out of the speakers, but it's showing here at 0, so I don't know why we'd be getting volume out of his speakers.
That is weird.
So.
But the microphone there is working.
Microphone here is working.
Well, if you can deal with a little feedback, I think this is.
Well, we'll have to. Okay, all right, let's get started. Let's do the best we can. You ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, November 18th, 2021. The time is now, I have 9:09 a.m. This is our weekly community development meeting. We do have a public hearing agenda this morning. Attending Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. And I'm going to ask, David, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes, sir. All rise. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have any potential conflicts of interest this morning? Hearing none. Our first item, which is an action item, is a public hearing. It's case number ZON for zone change 20-0004, a request by Dolan Land Management LLC for a zone change from restricted residential to commercial of 2 lots measuring a total of 8.963 acres in size. Vlad, take it away, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. As you just stated, this is a request to rezone 2 lots recently platted through a minor subdivision process. The subject property is located at the intersection of Highway 41 and Highway 54, directly to the west of Highway 54 and south of directly to the west of Highway 41 and south of Highway 54. As you can see, the subject property is heavily vegetated, and it does have some relief slope towards Spirit Lake. This property, as I stated, was recently platted through a minor subdivision called Dolan's Deal First Edition. It consisted of 4 lots. The 2 lots comprising of almost 9 acres are the subject of this request to be rezoned from restricted residential to commercial. The purpose of this rezone is to enable the property owner to develop the site with commercial businesses. The applicant is not proposing a conditional zoning development agreement at this time that would stipulate the specific use of the project site at this time. The comp plan designation is border, and as you can see, the white area in the northeast corner of the map is the city limits of Spirit Lake. The subject property is located within the city of Spirit Lake area of city impact. Pursuant to the county and city agreement, staff is obligated to notify the city and give them up to 30 days to comment on this proposal. The city of Spirit Lake did comment and stated they have no concerns or issues with the proposed rezone. This is the city zoning map. As you can see, the subject property is in this location, and it's all joined to the south and to the south and to the north by properties that are within the county jurisdiction. They're all zoned restricted residential. However, parcels that are within the city limits of Spirit Lake in this area are all zoned commercial to the northeast as well as to the east. This is a school, and it has the services zoning designation. I'd like to point out that while doing a site visit, this property here, directly to the northeast, is currently under construction. I believe there is a mini mart and a gas station that's currently being developed. These are some of the photos of the property in question. This is Highway 41. I believe this is facing south. As you can see, this is Highway 41 facing north, and this is the old abandoned right-of-way that's located on the west side of the property. And as I stated before, the site is heavily vegetated at this time. During the agency comment period, we solicited comments from all the agencies with jurisdiction, and the Idaho Department of Transportation stated that they issued an encroachment permit for the commercial approach. Panhandle Health District will have strict wastewater discharge limitation because the property is located over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer, and it requires a maximum of 250 gallons of wastewater discharge per 5 acres. Being that this property is less than 10 acres, there's probably going to be a maximum of approximately 400 gallons of wastewater discharge per day. The City of Spirit Lake, as I stated before, had no objection to this request, and Kootenai County Building stated that accessibility requirements and construction plans must be prepared for any future development on this site by a design professional. The City of Spirit Lake Fire District also had no objection to this request. This project had gone through 3 different public notice periods. There was one in August, and due to technical difficulties, the project was postponed to a hearing in September. Then there was a second public hearing scheduled for that date, and we did have a second public comment. And then we also had a third public comment period for today's hearing. In total, we received 33 comments on this request, 2 in support of the proposal, 1 neutral, 2 with no position but concerns over the potential commercial development, and the remaining 28 were in opposition. And there is a range of concerns with future commercial development. Specifically, a number of folks raised concerns with regard to compatibility of the proposed commercial use being adjacent to existing residential development to the west and to the south of this site, increasing traffic on Highway 41 and adjoining roads that enter onto Highway 41, specifically being Nautical Loop that is to the south of this property. There were also concerns about potentially, transients on site, groundwater contamination from future development, decrease in property values associated with the compatibility concerns of residential and commercial use, damage to the existing wildlife in the area, diminished privacy from potentially having the vegetation removed off-site, noise, litter, light, air, pollution, and impacts to the lake. And I'd like to point out that a number of these concerns were brought up after the public hearing we had before the hearing examiner, which was held on September 16th of this year. Based on the review of the information in the file, based on the site visit conducted by staff, we believe as a department that this site is ideal for the rezone for specific reasons of being next to 2 major state highways, being that there will be a requirement for a special notice permit should this rezone be approved. Specifically, the commercial zoning designation has a standard that any parcel that is zoned commercial adjacent to and fronting a state highway requires a special notice permit for assessment of traffic. And furthermore, the commercial designation requires extensive landscaping, screening, parking standards to minimize impacts to the surrounding parcels. So there are other trigger points that are in place to mitigate the impacts that were brought up by the opposition should the rezone be approved. The hearing examiner, as I stated, heard this request in September, and they sided with staff's position. Specifically, they stated that the site has more potential for commercial uses and is a higher and better use of the property. And the reason for that is that due to the noise associated with the highway and existing commercial uses to the north, specifically within the city of Spirit Lake city limits, this site is not desirable for a residential use. It would be more appropriate to be used for commercial operation. As I stated before, there's no specific design or use that's being proposed at this time, but there are limitations because of the PhD standards. The other statement that was provided in the HE analysis was that the commercial use would advance the economic value of the city of Spirit Lake and surrounding land by providing options for businesses. And that she also sided with staff's analysis that the PhD effluent discharge requirements over the aquifer would set specific limitations on the business, the number of employees, perhaps hours of operation, and so on. That being said, while we acknowledge and understand the concerns brought up by the public, we still believe that this is a good candidate for the rezone, specifically because of its location and limitations and other requirements that the commercial zone has upon approval of this request. I'd like to add that there is a commercial parcel directly to the east across Highway 41, and there are commercial parcels on the west side of this property across the lake. I do want to acknowledge that we had given a lot of review to the public comments, and while a number of the concerns are legitimate, a number of them were just, in our view, simply, I would say, miscommunication or lack of understanding of the request. I do stand for any questions that you have at this time.
Questions for Vlad? Vlad, I have a couple. Parcels immediately to the north and south on the same side of the road. What's that zone?
It's restricted residential.
So north and south is restricted residential. Clearly to the west is restricted residential.
Yes, sir.
Because they border their shoreline. And I don't know if you guys can answer this. How on earth? Well, never mind. How did this ever wind up restricted residential?
On the lake, you mean?
No, the lake, the shorefront, I understand, even though that's never made any sense to me. But
You mean the next row back?
the subject parcel.
That's an easy one.
Go ahead.
All of the restricted residential in the county dates back to 1973.
Okay.
That decision was made at that time. It's never been changed.
Right.
And you would have to ask the people in 73
I don't know if they're still alive. That's
as
all.
to why it was that they thought that was good planning practice.
Okay.
Well, also bear in mind that the city of Spirit Lake has expanded to the south since then, too.
I'm sorry.
So,
Spirit Lake's extended to the south.
prior to that, it may have made more sense.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. Any other questions for Vlad? Okay. So let's move on to our public hearing. The first individual who wishes to speak, Brad Marshall. Brad, come forward, please. We've got your name, we've got your address, but I guess would you state it, please, for the record?
Good morning, I'm Brad Marshall, I'm with JUB Engineers, address is 7825 Meadowlark Way in Coeur d'Alene. Again, it's a pleasure to represent Dolan Land Management on this property. Side note, the Dolan family is a third generation Spirit Lake family, Coeur d'Alene family. They came to this Spirit Lake at the turn of the century when the original lumber mill was built, and have acquired and owned property throughout the region. I'm going to I developed a PowerPoint as well. You'll certainly see some duplicate slides to the Vlad's because I wasn't quite sure what he had and what was in mine. I'll try to go through this fairly quick.
You want to F5 and then we'll take you through the presentation. Can you see? There you go.
It's not sliding forward. There we go. Again, as Vlad mentioned, again, it's two lots. Lots 1 and 2 of Dolan Steel First Edition, which is about 8.9 acres, created through a normal subdivision process.
The remote's not working?
It's not.
Oh, Vlad will drive it.
Next slide, please. Next slide. Again, this is an aerial photo indicating the site. Let's see if that pointer works. Oh, there we go. Again, this is the rough area, Highway 41, Highway 54, the Timberlake High School in this area. This property is within the city, it's zoned commercial. This property is within the city, in the county, zoned commercial, restricted residential. This is a civic site. It's important to understand a couple of specifics here. This is the old railroad right-of-way that goes through the west edge of the property. It's a pretty good elevation difference dropping down to the old mill site. So there's about 100-foot elevation difference between Highway 41 and the elevation of the lake. And in this trough, I guess you could say, or valley or gully, where the old railroad right-of-way, there's about a 10, 20, 30-foot drop in there. So it creates a really nice buffer or screening between the plateau along the highway and the lower elevation areas here. It's also important to understand kind of what's going on with the roads here. So this is what's called Nautical Loop Road. This is a Lakes Highway District maintained road. It kind of meanders into here and services. Nice area, really nice area. And some homes along the lake, some homes in the air here. We're proposing an access that comes in off Highway 41 right into the south end of the site. It will not go through Nautical Loop. So there's a clear separation between future commercial traffic and uses and the access to those residential areas. Again, overview of the site. Next slide, Glenn. When we look at rezones, we often look at the comprehensive plans. That's the long-range plans for the communities. And we look at the future land use map, kind of what's predicted, and the goals and objectives and policies of that plan and how they apply to the rezone. And there's some specific ones in both the county's comprehensive plan and in the city of Spirit Lake's comprehensive plan because the property is an ACI. I'll save you from reading this big blah, blah, blah thing. But the tail end that says there's an objective 1B that speaks of allowing commercial use that serve the local residents and harmonize with the properties in the area. Another one that speaks of existing local business and startup of new businesses, particularly those that provide family wage job opportunities. And then there's a Spirit Lake comprehensive plan goal. That's the city's comprehensive plan, and that's an important one because again, we're in the area city impact. Highway 41, south of Rhode Island. This area is surrounded by junior and senior high school residential areas to the east, some undeveloped and single family homes to the west. Commercial development is recommended in this stretch along Highway 41, including use as drugstore or other community serving commercial uses. Oh, it's working.
Oh, it's working.
Okay.
Recommended by who?
The question was recommended by whom?
Oh, good. Good questions. Again, both the city and the county go through a comprehensive planning or a long-range planning process. It goes through the planning commission, the county commissioner. It's a very public process and ultimately adopted by the jurisdictions.
Okay, and I'm going to ask, folks, you have to hold your questions. If you want to comment, you can do so, but this is not a question and answer period right now. Proceed, Brad, please.
Yeah. And Vlad mentioned this before. This is the comprehensive plan designation. It's a border designation for this property, which means a more intensive use of the property. The area is within the area city impact at the city of Spirit Lake. Again, the area city impacts were agreements that were negotiated between the county and the city 20, 25 years ago, indicating those areas that were to be developed more intensely and ideally moved into the city or over time. This is the City of Spirit Lakes Comprehensive Plan, future land use map. And again, it indicates the site in this area as residential along the lake and commercial along the highway. So it kind of predicted that in their plan years ago. Again, this is the county's current zoning map. Vlad did a good job of kind of reiterating that, but again, the site is here as zone restricted residential. We're seeking the commercial zone change. Restricted residential here. Directly to the east is a county commercial zone here, and this is a city commercial zoning here. And as Vlad mentioned, there's actually a small grocery convenience store that's under development on the site, and I believe a Zips that's going in on the north end of that property too. So there was a comment made by the public, and rightly so, that this was spot zoning. I'd respectfully disagree because it's adjacent to two commercial zones. I want to talk a little bit about buffering. There were some good letters by the public in the record that speaks of kind of buffering and the impacts of commercial uses to their residential uses. And, at first glance, it gets your attention. They make good comments, but there's kind of a response to that we got to kind of sort out. One thing is just the elevation difference and the distance of the commercial uses to the adjacent uses. This is kind of a diagram here. It's an elevation diagram that we built. And this shows Highway 41, potential commercial use adjacent to Highway 41, kind of heading west, and that old railroad right-of-way, kind of that trough. So that, again, it creates a nice land use buffer right there on the property. Well, and this likely will not be redeveloped. It's just, it'd be a significant effort to fill and regrade, and it would be extremely challenging and cost prohibitive. So it creates a nice buffer. And then, again, as we drop down to the lake itself, there's a significant difference in elevation between the lake and the commercial uses along the highway of about 100 feet. And we'll say, sometimes we wonder, well, 100 feet, what's that? Well, they give you a perspective. Like an average ponderosa pine or a bull pine is often 85 to 110 feet. So, a pine tree. Gave a kind of perspective. And then we looked at the difference, horizontal difference between the highway and the lake itself and those lake homes. And those are our friends and neighbors too. We want to make sure there's good separation. There's about 1,000 feet of horizontal difference from the highway, the center line of the highway, to the lake itself. So a good 1,000-foot difference there. Vlad mentioned this before, but it's important to kind of reiterate it again. When you go through a rezone process, it's zoned commercial, and then to define the use and actually get a permit, you often require a special use permit, special notice, that requires a little more review and scrutiny and detailed site plans of the actual use and landscaping and mitigations of that. So there's another step, and there's more mitigation to that. Also, as part of that, your own zoning code requires performance standards. Again, this is fencing, screening, landscaping. They again buffer that commercial use against the adjoining residential uses. So there's some safeguards there. Those plans are required to be prepared by a licensed engineer or a licensed landscape architect and reviewed by the county to make sure they meet the standards. So there's some pretty good safeguards there on the landscaping. One thing I also want to mention is lighting. If it were developed as commercial use, there's naturally some lighting, security lighting, blah, blah. The code requires screening of that lighting, shielding of that lighting that directs the lighting onto the commercial site, cannot extend beyond the property lines to the adjacent residential. So lots of good stuff there to protect both parties. I want to talk a little bit about access to the site. I mentioned it before in the prior slide. This is a copy of Dolan's Deal First Edition plat that created the lots. And again, these are the two lots. We had originally proposed access to the site straight off Highway 54 at this intersection. We thought it would create a nice four-way intersection. ITD came back and said, well, at this point in time, we're not so fond of that direct access. We'd like you to shift it farther to the south and away from the intersection itself. So they allowed us to apply and obtain, we have an encroachment permit to allow access off the highway here and then extend into this lot, into this lot. Again, we're not using the Nautical loop access, so there's a clear separation there. And again, there's that old railroad right-of-way that kind of cuts through here too. So it creates a really nice land use separation between the access points and the railroad right-of-way. And ultimately, I think it'll work out really nicely. I want to talk a little bit about traffic. What's there today and what's there in the future. We looked at the ITD trip generation traffic counts in that area. And I think this is part of the record as well, but in 2019, ITD did traffic counts in this area. Now, on Highway 41 alone, during a 24-hour period, there were 7,000 trips a day. On Highway 54, just to the east, there were 3,700 trips a day in 2019. And what we've all seen some growth here, of course, and additional traffic in our area. So I can only imagine what they are today and what are they going to be in 5 years or 10 years. I'm not sure if the commissioners had a chance to actually be to the site, but when you stand on this site and you're standing on the project area, there's significant noise, trips. It's just part of everyday life, but it is not an area that you'd actually want to build a house and live on. There's a lot of traffic noise, and probably more to come. I want to talk a little bit about infrastructure and utilities for those potential commercial uses. We want to make sure that there's good environmental safeguards in place for that. And we always think of roads, water, and wastewater when we think of infrastructure and supporting dry utilities like electricity and natural gas. The site is over the aquifer. We've done a groundwater study, and there's ample groundwater for the site. So very ample water there. Being that we're in the county's jurisdiction outside of outside the city, where these uses would develop an on-site wastewater system, which is commonly called septic tank and drain field. The health district limits the commercial use of this property to equivalent to a house, which is about 250, 300 gallons a day. And when you think of a house, your daily living, most of your wastewater, sometimes we think of toilets, flushing and stuff, that's a pretty small amount. Most of your wastewater is really coming from washing dishes, taking showers, and that kind of more germane wastewater. So again, the health district is going to limit the uses of this property pretty significantly to really restrooms type uses. So when we think of commercial uses that would be developed on this property, they've got to be fairly limited. They could be like storage facilities. They could be a veterinary clinic that has a restroom, a daycare that has some restrooms, maybe professional office, possibly a convenience store. There's one across the street, so I'm not sure that's a fit anymore. So they're really more like professional office space or storage, some limited type of, or maybe a service business that has some limited restroom abilities for its employees, not users. There's also some pretty good, there's a comment about the Rocky Point Homeowner Association, and they have a community well that's to the south of the site that services their area. And I believe the HOA president submitted a letter. And it's a good letter. He's doing his job, protecting his water source for his community. So he needs to raise a yellow flag and say, hey, what's going on here? Let's take a look at this. And we kind of took a little closer look, and their well is about 650 feet away from this site, so it's a pretty good distance. Also a reminder, the health district has some standards and codes that speak to secondary containment for any type of use that's more challenging on the site. So anything is always going to be protected in a shell or a tank, and then below that tank is a concrete structure with curb and gutter that keeps that containment protected. Anything from entering the groundwater. And then that's all inspected on a yearly basis too by the health district. So there's some good mechanisms in there to protect all parties involved. When you apply for a zone change, first and foremost is, in order to obtain approval, does it meet the code? Does it meet the findings? And we've kind of worked through that. Just as your staff has recommended approval, your hearing examiner has recommended approval. I'll kind of save you from going through each one of those, but there's, I think is it 9 or 11 standards or findings. And we are very confident both in our submittal application, the staff report, and the hearing examiner's recommendation that this rezone meets those standards clearly. And quite frankly, that's why your planning staff recommend approval. That's why your hearing examiner recommend approval.
Okay.
Kind of wrapping up, we do believe this is the highest, best use of the property is commercial. The comp plan supports it, both in the future land use maps and the goals. There's a special notice requirements down the road that'll really define that use. We'll have to meet future performance standards for buffering and landscaping, and the application meets those 11 findings. With that, we thank you for your consideration, and we expect approval and stand for questions the board may have.
Any questions for Mr. Marshall? I have one, Brad. Could you please show what is the shortest, the closest distance or the shortest distance between the subject lot and the nearest residential property line, if you know
Let's see
that?
if we can get to
Yeah, there you go. That, it seems that would be the point. Can you estimate it?
nearest adjacent residential, probably would be, well, they're adjacent, I mean,
Yeah, the property owner's adjacent, but the homes are.
The
Or
homes are right up
distance.
that's a
against-
good
yeah,
question.
yeah.
I think I can. Let's see let's go the other way, sorry. Let's go to an aerial.
Right there shows it.
Yeah, go back.
There. No, there.
There you go.
That's the one.
So
that-
next
okay.
door is the answer.
Yeah.
How far the homes are is a different
It's
question.
a different
I was
question.
gonna go to the aerial, that might give it a better,
Yeah. And that's fine.
yeah.
That gives me.
Yeah, most of the homes, are along the waterfront, so they're quite, people like to live as close as possible to the lake. So they're down in here, through here, through here. There's a house here, there's a house in here on a large lot. Yeah, but most of them are down.
You're touching multiple properties.
Hold the comments, please.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, so let's move on. We do have other folks who wish to speak. By the way, we're going to limit the comments to 3 minutes, as we typically do with public hearings. The reason Brad Marshall got more time is because he represents the applicant, and that is quite customary as to the way we conduct public hearings. So the first name on here is, I guess it's Jan Madison, who is opposed and wishes to speak. Go right ahead, ma'am.
Okay, you need to either come up to a table with a microphone or the podium.
I'm just dumbfounded that this could even happen. This has been zoned residential, restricted residential since '73. I moved here in 1977 and looked at the property just to find, so we weren't, I don't even know, I don't know what to say. There's our whole area, there's houses. This is in our backyard. This has been zoned. We knew it was restricted residential when we moved here, when we built here. We did not just pick a spot and say, okay, whatever happens. We knew there'd be a high school. I helped get that high school in. I was all for it. That was already commercial. There's commercial all over it. Why are we going after our area? Because the Dolans have property. Unfortunately, it's not fit for people to build on. I mean, there could. But who wants to live that close to the highway? Who wants a commercial building in their backyard? Well, that's what's happening to us. You put something commercial there, you don't know what it's going to be yet. You're putting that in our backyard, and that's just not right. I feel like our rights are being taken away. For many reasons. I put in our letters, I mean, I only have 3 minutes, I babbled on here, but how many people have to object to this before it's going to get considered? I mean, we didn't get letters the first time. That's why there was no objections, because we weren't within 500 feet. Well, there's a lot of houses in here that are 600 feet, 700 feet. We're going to be impacted greatly. We were impacted a lot when the high school came in, but that's progress. We knew it was going to happen. I talked to Phil Dolan personally when the high school went in. It was heavily, kids were going through the woods, and there was partying in the woods during lunch break, and Phil was really nice about it. He took care of it. He logged it nicely, cleared it out for a little path. Very considerate of the people that lived in the area. They can't sell their property the way it is and get them what they want for it, but if it's commercial, they stand to make a lot of money and devastate our area. And we just ask that you please come out. Just come. You can't see on a map what's going on here. Just come out and walk with us, talk with us, and see what's really going on here, because it's just not right. So I don't know what else to say. I'm sick about it, and I just want to know how many people will it take to stop this? I mean, don't we have rights when you buy something and it's zoned a certain way? How can this happen? Because somebody wants to sell their property and make more money. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So the next individual who wishes to speak is Nancy Barlow, is opposed and wishes to speak. Ms. Barlow, please.
Thank you. In answer to your question, I happen to live, and my property line is about 20 feet from this. Just right across Watkins Lane. And I built 7 years ago on this property, relying on the fact that it was residential. And there are deer coming through that have their fawns in the woods, and they come through. I see them all the time. That'll be gone. There won't be any more of the rabbits. There won't be any more deer. The moose used to come across my property to get down to the lake. That won't happen anymore. This whole development, I mean, the high school was one thing, but this thing on the other side of Highway 41, which is apparently technically in Spirit Lake, they allowed the building of what is a huge truck stop. It is not a little convenience store and gas station. And there were already 2 gas stations in Spirit Lake. But to take off the trees from the other side, and you mentioned vegetation, these are huge, beautiful trees. And they do provide the sound barrier for us living on this side of the lake. And I realized I don't have lake frontage. So apparently I'm not as important, because it's no lake frontage. But it is still, wooded property. It's lakeland property. And that was what it was going to be, and that's why I built. And I spent substantial money building my own home there, because it was going to continue to be that way. Now, in regard to the previous hearings, I wrote letters both on July and August 16th in these previous hearings objecting to this. However, I didn't realize at that time that nobody was being notified of these hearings except for me, because my property is very close. So I was getting these notices. Other people in the community were not. So they didn't have the opportunity to object. And, when the Dolan representative says, oh, it'll just be little storage or a vet or a day's care. No, there's no guarantee as to what will be built on this property. Once it becomes commercial, anything can be built there. And there will be litter, noise, and danger. My brother owns a small acre right adjacent to my property. He wasn't notified, but I've talked to him.
Excuse me, you have 15 seconds, ma'am.
Okay, well, the possibility of crime and litter and those lights, there's no way you can maintain a light within property lines. You turn on one of those huge floodlights and the light is everywhere. You can't see the stars anymore. And anyway, I just, it's just going to destroy my privacy and my personal ability. It'll increase danger. And I already have issues, and my 97-year-old mother, who's staying there in the same property, I mean, it's just an issue having
Ma'am,
all
I
this.
do have to stop you because we have a number of items. Thank you.
Okay. May I say one more thing?
Go right
I
ahead.
do have a video of the driving up the road to see the trees on one side and the gas station on the other. If anybody wants to look at it, I'm not technologically competent to do anything but push the button on the phone.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Hold on,
Yeah.
please. Okay, we also have Greg Madison opposed, may wish to speak. You want to defer? Yes, go right ahead. Do you want to come up to
You
the
need to
microphone?
come back up.
please?
I'd like to make a clarification. It's not Rocky Point Water District, it's Rocky Beach Water District.
Okay,
And he sent in, on behalf of 50-some people on our water district, that we were all opposing it, not just a few people.
Okay.
Also, I've called 3 times to find out if we're going to get a traffic light at the intersection of Highway 51 and 41. I have not gotten a call back. 15 years ago, I had called, and they said there haven't been enough people killed at that intersection yet. And I'm assuming it's the same law. So I'd like to know about that too. Even if it doesn't get rezoned, which I hope it doesn't, but with that gas station there on the corner and the high school right there, I would hope that there would be a traffic signal.
thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone on Zoom or online who wishes to speak?
So we'll let David, you'll
David?
help us with that.
Yes, sir. We have a number of people on Zoom. If you are, at this time, if you would like to speak,
We want to speak.
go right ahead.
Yes.
None.
Your name and address, please.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
Okay,
Go.
Holly and Jason Hill. Holly and Jason Hill, 30951 North Cornish Lane. The property and the subject property touches the back of our property. If you come out here and walk, you see how inappropriate it is to even bring it back that far. The property itself is a wildlife trail, including not just deer, but moose and loons and geese and mountain lions and eagles. So, yes, you talked about there cannot be a house there. Well, there's a house directly across from it on the same side of the road, on the west side of the road, right across from Nautical Lane. So it can be done. But commercial, you're not telling us what. No one was even notified from the neighbors I asked. They said that they didn't even know about it. I didn't know about it. One of my neighbors notified me at the mailbox. You talk about walls being up and we're going to be just fine and lights being shielded. But you're bringing it way back into the property. This is not just about lake property. In most lakes, there's first tier, second tier, third tier, fourth tier water property. But you guys are coming up right to the water and right to the back doors of people who've been living in a community that is very tight-knit. And it seems like the only person that is important to you is one person over the needs of all these others. You guys have asked the city. You should have been asking us, because we are the ones that live here. We are the ones that are affected. So tell us how you feel. You say you don't know what's going in there. It'll probably be a restaurant. This division isn't even appropriate. It should not be commercial all the way back here to where the lake is. I can't even imagine how an EPA would look at this and think this is okay. I don't understand. I've walked it. Which one of you have come out and looked at the property? Can I have names?
Ma'am, keep going.
Anybody? I asked the question. Did anybody come out and look at the property?
Ma'am, the answer to your question is there are certain rules of play that we have to follow. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, which means we cannot individually go and visit properties that are being petitioned before us, and that's basically by state code. The only way that... Hold on, ma'am. I'm trying to respond to your question. And the only way we can do that is all three of us in a car with a clerk and a recording. And so we have not actually had the opportunity or chosen to do that in this case. However, the property was visited by our planner, Vlad Finkel, and so that's the answer to your question. But your time is ticking, so go right ahead, please.
So you took away my time with that long answer. Okay, I'm going. This is not an appropriate area for commercial. You already have commercial on the other side. Put commercial on the west side, you instantly increase the traffic jam, and this is only a 2-lane highway. It's simply not appropriate, not in any way, shape, or form. If you think it is, then somehow you should get in that car with that recorder and come up here and take a look.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Anybody else? David, please.
If there's anyone else on Zoom that would like to speak at this time, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, this is Evan Koch. I had my hand up, but I'll just take the initiative to speak. Thank you, David, and thank you, commissioners, for allowing us the chance to weigh in on this. There was a hearing back in September that I wasn't even aware of, so I'm really grateful that...
Please give us your name and address.
Yeah, my name's Evan Koch, and my address is 30899 North Nautical Loop. I would question 3 or 4 of the assertions made by the engineers who represent the Dolan properties. Number 1, I believe they exaggerated the horizontal difference, or at least the effect of the horizontal difference. The houses themselves are not located on the waterfront. All the homes are located well back, at least 100 feet from the waterfront. And so the horizontal difference is minimal at best. They're really just a few feet below street level, so the sound won't be buffered by any trees, even if they don't remove any trees, or by the terrain change. Number 2, they exaggerated the vertical difference. The homes, as I said, are back from the waterfront, and so the slope is very steep between the homes and the waterfront, and the homes are actually essentially on the same level as the street. And number 3, they claimed that the old rail bed forms a buffer of some sort. It's not clear to me what kind of buffer it forms, but in very unpracticable terms. It doesn't blunt the sound. It certainly doesn't blunt the light, and it just prevents people from walking around because they've already sold off a piece of it and built fences along the way so that people and animals can't walk along it any longer. So it is not at all helpful. Noise levels have definitely gone up in recent time because of the increased traffic, but also because of tree removal. And as one of the previous commenters reported, light does not respect property lines. We expect our light to be polluted by both the gas station on the corner and whatever development we are going to be forced to face on this particular subject property.
Okay, so
thank you very much.
Okay, you're very welcome. David?
Anyone?
Barbara Doherty. Yeah, Barbara Doherty.
Go right ahead.
Hello?
Yep, go right ahead, ma'am.
Barbara Doherty, we've lived at 30379. It's either 30379 or 30369 since 1976. I have several concerns. I know the Dolan family well. I went to school with Jim Dolan. My number one question is, why is the Dolan family moving to change this property to commercial when they have a property north of this property that would be better suited to a commercial property? I just secondly have a concern about development of the west side of the road as opposed to the east side of the road. And my concern there lies in damage to the lake. This year, for the first time since 1979 that I can remember, we've dealt with a blue algae development that's related to phosphates entering the lake. I have concerns about this property, which by your vertical or horizon picture shows a clear drainage of this property down into the lake. And as we all know, with landscaping, there's going to be an increase in fertilizer, which is going to go directly into the lake, which is going to place the lake at great risk. for the better part of August and September. None of us were able to use the lake because of this. I have concerns with regards to placement of the property. If you were to go out there, you would see that this property sits just north of what amounts to almost a blind curve on that highway. It's very dangerous entering from Nautical Loop, from either the south end of Nautical Loop or the north end of Nautical Loop, and with an access not directly across from it's the Highway 54, making that a nice, whatever you called it, not T, but a four-way access to that property. You're going to have further access difficulty from the north end of Nautical Loop Road with another access site just directly north of that. I think that there's going to be clear damage to all of us in terms of decrease in sound buffering, light buffering, and clearly there are other properties in Spirit Lakes that could be developed commercially before this property. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. David?
We have a couple of others. Dawn, Denise, did you want to speak? Anyone else on Zoom at this time?
Okay.
Paul, you need to unmute.
You should be able to unmute yourself.
Ma'am, are you
Run
there?
your mouse to the top of your...
Yep.
Can you hear now?
Yes.
Yeah. Name and address, please.
Yes, Paul Hastings, 30443 North Nautical Loop.
Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just wanted to call attention to the notification process. Realize it's very late in the game, and it sounds like there's an awful lot of support from your board for this project already. But I would like to comment on the difficulty of the process in terms of giving input as residents, neighbors to this proposed commercial zoning. The original sign, in talking with Vlad, was placed on the highway, a road that people travel 40 to 45, 50 miles an hour, very hard to see. When we walked there a couple weeks ago, we took a walk to see if the little notification sign, about 2 by 3 feet in size, was there. There was nothing there. We called Vlad, and he received us very nicely by telephone. Right after that call, the sign appeared again. So the signage itself was very weak, and it was not placed in a way that allowed people to really see it driving at that rate of speed. Because of statutes or laws, also the adjoining property owners were notified. I think there were 1 or 2, just a few of them. But many of us that live within just a very close proximity to this property, we were not notified in any way by letter. And I just find that difficult. This morning when we got on to the Zoom link, the Zoom link was not there on the site. And so there are many people, you received, I think, 28 letters opposing, who were not able to join by Zoom. There's some really key players with some real concerns that have not had an opportunity to speak. I talked with Amy this morning. She was very helpful and apologetic. She could not find why that Zoom link was not there. So that's really a concern in terms of process. And I would just finish by saying it would be very helpful to delay this and at least come and visit with us, talk with us, walk this property with us, and see if we could have some further conversation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. David? Does anyone else wish to speak?
Go ahead and unmute yourself at this time if you'd like to speak. Apparently not.
Okay, so Brad? Yes, Vlad. Yeah, go right ahead.
Commissioners, for the record, Vlad Finkel, Community Development. In reading through the public comments, I noticed the same concerns that were raised at today's hearing with regard to the notification process. A number of folks have stated that they were not notified of the first public hearing, but they have been notified of this hearing. Myself and administrative staff in our office have reviewed the adjacent property ownership notification documentation that was compiled, including mapping of the property in question and the buffer area of 500 feet, and the list of the individuals that were on our computer system popped up as those that need to be notified. The same number of individuals were notified for the prior hearing as were for today's hearing. There was no difference in the number of individuals that were being notified. Just want to put that into the record.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Hold on, ma'am, please. Okay.
I need to respond to what he said.
That's quite all right. Just hold off, please. You folks have had a chance to speak, and the way we handle this typically is the appellant or the representative for the appellant gets to rebut. Brad Marshall, you've got 5 minutes. Do you wish to speak, sir?
For the record, Brad Marshall, JEB Engineers, 7825 Meadowlark Way in Coeur d'Alene, representing Dolan Land Management. Again, we submit a very good application that meets the applicable comprehensive plan, both the city of Spirit Lake and the county, the city's codes. Planning staff has recommended approval. The hearing examiner has recommended approval. I guess we've submitted a PowerPoint that speaks to that as part of the record as well. We believe that we have a solid application. In more detail, I want to talk a little bit about, one of the items that came up was just kind of wildlife impacts and the removal of trees and vegetation. While the Dolans have done a good job and care for the property, they have selectively logged the property over the years, and it looks very nice. And we think when the property is developed, there are performance standards that are required by the county to require a lot of those trees to be retained, particularly along the edge of the property as part of a buffer in addition fencing. If the property were not developed today and sold or the Dolans, there's really nothing to prohibit somebody from removing the trees, logging the entire piece property itself. So it's just a general reminder that we all have to be cognizant of that. So the development actually will retain that buffer and landscaping. I want to talk a little bit about public notice. Very important. It's a very public process. We live in a democratic society. We want those comments. That notice was supplied to everybody within 500 feet, which is required by code. It's also posted on site, advertisements in the paper. And then there's those that kind of word of mouth, the neighbors talking to the neighbors, which is a good thing. Then again, it was done again. There's also, again, ads posted on site, ads in the paper. The important part to remember is there was a second hearing. We're here today. And there's been an ample amount of public comment, written comments that's been submitted. I'm sure the commissioners have reviewed it. There's been an ample amount of testimony today. And your decision has not been made yet. So the public has had an opportunity to comment on this project sufficiently. Again, we submitted a strong application. The agencies are in support. The staff is in support. The hearing examiner is support. We'd respectfully request approval.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Brad Marshall? Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay, so at this point, what I'm going to do, ma'am, I'm going to let you come forward, but you've got to make it brief because I'm deviating from normal practice here. So make your point, okay?
My name is Nancy Barlow. I was one of the people that got the notice, the physical actual notice. And I talked to Janet Madison, who had not gotten the notice. And the only reason why so many responses now is because she knows a lot of people in the area, which I did not. And she told them, and that's why there are more people responding now. It's not because any notices were sent to most of the concerned people. And I should also say this land is in Kootenai County. If there are any issues in this commercial property, then they have to call the Kootenai County Sheriff, not Spirit Lake Police, which means it'll take at least 30 to 40 minutes to get
Thank you,
police.
ma'am. Okay, so at this point, okay, that's it for public
Pardon me.
testimony, folks. So I'm going to entertain a motion to end public testimony and enter into deliberations, please.
Yes, I move that we end public testimony and enter into deliberations.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan.
Aye.
Chair Philios.
Aye. We're actually deliberating, but the recommendation was made, and we always have this option to conduct a visit to the property. Do any of my co-commissioners feel that's necessary?
I'll go either way. I don't mind visiting, but I just drove by this area the other day because on my regular travels, and I'm familiar with it, so.
Okay. Bill?
No.
Likewise, no, I don't think it's necessary. Okay, we have our planner, he's done his due diligence. Okay, so any thoughts while we go forward? Leslie, how do you feel?
Why do I have to go first? No,
I
just
go
kidding.
first at times too. Go ahead.
I think this is a difficult situation because change is always hard, and we have a lot of growth. And when you're talking about people's quality of life, I think that we have to be sensitive to it. I mean, being here 3 years now and going through a number of these hearings, I don't have one situation in the 3 years that the worst case scenario has been realized. And I think the commercial designation presents a couple different benefits. Like Mr. Marshall mentioned, it actually prevents the clear cutting. It makes a buffer remain. So that has to happen. There is lights and shielding and stuff like that is available that can keep the light from encroaching far away. I think too with the Panhandle Health District, that is going to severely limit what type of businesses are allowed to go in there. So it's a restaurant I don't believe can meet that the low threshold of that. So I think that although it is difficult decision, it's one of these where nobody likes change. Nobody likes the fact that all this property on the prairie has been annexed and now is going to be hundreds and hundreds of homes. So we've also heard that argument, but we have to, I mean, in my mind, I'm following the law, and the law allows this type of change when all those criteria are met. So once the commercial use is brought forward, that'll be another opportunity to make sure that the new use will be in compliance with all of the standards and that it will not cause a negative impact on the surrounding homes.
Okay, thank you. Bill, thoughts?
I agree pretty much with what Leslie has said. I am not in favor of generally voting anybody who comes in and buys a piece of property that's zoned, ag or anything else, and then comes right back and says, I want to zone it commercial. That's, in my opinion, somebody looking for a quick buck to develop without responsibility. Somebody who's owned a piece of property for a while and wants to do something, I'm much more inclined to approve.
Okay, David, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
This property was inherited, it's been in the family for some time, is that true? Can someone answer that?
Vlad probably knows.
Vlad?
Mr. Marshall testified that this family has been here for 3 generations.
Okay.
So it's
I think that
significant.
answers the question. Okay, anyway, so are you done?
Yeah.
As I think Leslie pointed out, these decisions are always difficult, and occasionally with land use decisions, such as this one, I find myself at times being able to go either way. But when we look at the conditions of approval, or the conditions required for approval, and especially as stipulated in the comprehensive plan. And Brad Marshall indicated those earlier, and he went through one by one and indicated that in almost every case it meets. But what's interesting is that if there's a case where it doesn't meet, it's essentially all or none. And what's very interesting is if you look at section 7.2, it talks about consistency with current use. If there were additional commercial zoning on this side of Route 41, the properties to the north and to the south are also zoned restricted residential. Now, it's interesting that we could argue whether or not it should have been restricted residential, and maybe it makes more sense to be commercial because it does abut 41. But the fact of the matter is that the commercial zoning is across the road. It's across the Route 41. It's not north and south. And hearing some of the folks indicate the fact that, that any potential commercial development would come close. I understand also that there is the potential for a gap because of the change in elevation, which presents a buffer. But I still don't see the consistency of use on the same side of Highway 41. Hence, I cannot support this. I have to part with the hearing examiner and staff's analysis. I cannot support this request for a rezone. Any further comments?
Just that being across the street for me is consistent, and this is a state highway, and we approved a commercial in rural, I don't know how many years ago, but it's on like Bruner and 95, and their intent is a gas station, but that one was commercial out of nowhere. There was no other surrounding commercial there. So to me, it's one of those things where this does have commercial across the street. It is in the comprehensive plan able to make these sorts of changes because that's kind of where it is. You take your main routes and your commercial develops from there. And then at a point, there's always where commercial meets residential. I mean, in cities, it's amazing. You've got places that you live above the commercial. So that's just where I landed with this one.
Okay. Director Callahan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to pursue the legal question in my mind, it's a legal one, of possible due process, and ask our legal counsel to weigh in on it. Specifically, a concern by one of our Zoom speakers that the Zoom link was not sufficiently available. I believe it was, by law, sufficiently available because it was on the agenda and the agenda was made public. And I believe that meets the requirement, but it would be useful if Pat wouldn't mind weighing in to give you his opinion.
Pat, you want to weigh in, please?
Yes, I think it's one of these deals. I think the notice, met at least the minimal legal requirements for the notice. At the same time, I think we can do better in the future, but I don't see a legal issue with regard to how this particular hearing is noticed.
Okay.
I can add that the Zoom link that the speaker mentioned was something we do above and beyond what's required by law.
Good point.
It slipped through the cracks in this case because the person who actually used to do it is no longer with us.
Right. Okay. Bill, do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay. Leslie, anything else?
Nope.
Yeah, I'm still concerned about the proximity of the development to the houses. I understand the abutting on Route 41 is commercial, but in this case, the commercial is awfully close to what is and continues to remain as restricted residential. Some of the issues that we that we deal with zoning go back to designations that perhaps should not have been made when they were years ago, but and certainly in some cases we do change them, but on the other hand, I cannot support this. So in any case, is there a motion?
I move that we approve case number ZON 20-0004, a request by Dolan Land Management.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan.
Aye.
Chair Philios.
Nay. So case number ZON 20-0004 is hereby approved by a vote of 2-1. Time is now 10:17, and this public hearing is ended.
Yeah.
That's it.
How about the issue of eminent domain? Half my property values.
Ma'am, public hearing is ended.
So it's a done deal? This is going to happen?
It is approved.
Yep.
The zoning change is approved. It will be zoned commercial, or rezoned commercial.
Well, what about all the other people on the highway that have property over there? Then they want to open up restaurants and go commercial?
Ma'am, that's an entirely different issue. Those people,
It's going to be the same.
well,
You're just taking
I
our.
can't believe they did.
The people who live in the city, by the way, they choose to live in the city above other people. Those of us who live in the neighborhood choose to live.
And I agree, and I would suggest banding together as a neighborhood and offering to buy this property. And then that way you're protected.
Dolans have so much property in
If
this
we
town.
could afford that, we would have frontage. Many houses back from the lake.
Sure.
Buy the property ourselves if we want privacy. Come on.
okay, thank you, everyone.
Signing.
So we have signings to deal with at this point. So the first action item, the first signing that confronts us is MSF 21-0006, Walking Horse Estates, first and second edition. It's a request by Walking Horse Partners LLC for final approval of a 31-lot residential major subdivision comprised of two additions on approximately 160 acres in the rural zone. Vlad, please.
Good morning once again, Vlad Finkel with Community Development. Pursuant to the board's decision, staff has prepared an order of decision for your review and signing.
I move that we execute the order of decision for case number MSF 21-0006.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan.
Aye.
Chair Philios.
Aye, and the motion is carried, executing the order of decision. Should have brought a blue pen. Ran out of ink. Do you have to leave at 10:30?
Oh my gosh. No, I'm okay.
Are you
I think
okay?
I can do 10:45.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
we're good.
just checked yours and stopped signing. I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine.
My Leslie Duncan signature is not as good as it used to be.
That's quite all right. All right.
Okay, then, so that concludes the signing section of our agenda this morning. Moving on to our business segment, this is our community development update. First item, consideration of hiring a planning consultant to manage the tribal rezoning and the zoning overlay or rezoning of the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer area. This is a discussion item. Director Callahan, go ahead, David.
Commissioners, as you know, we are short-staffed, and those two items you just mentioned are major projects. I would like to be able to hire a consultant to be what would normally be the project manager like Vlad or Ben or what have you, merely because these are important projects that need to go forward, but I don't have the staff to deal with it. I can also add that last year we were about 200% over budget on consultant fees, but you know from the numbers that Dina's provided, the income has come in to offset that. I expect the same exact thing this year, 200% or more, but similarly, figures are coming in that we're offsetting it. So I'm hopeful that you agree that this will be a useful way to go forward.
How long would this person be employed for?
You know, I need to actually sit down with them, talk it through and get them to give me a proposal. I don't know, to answer your question, but I think normally with staff would spend 6-8 months on any one of these kinds of projects. The useful difference here is that staff has 12 other projects they're working on, so that's part of why it stretches out. If a consultant's doing this, they tend to be able to focus, and so it might be a shorter time frame, but we do have statutory requirements to meet for a 28-day notice with Plan Commission and then again with you, and so on. So I'm sorry I don't actually have that nailed down
I'm
yet.
interested in approving it, but I want to know
Sure.
how much,
Of
how
course.
long, how many.
Well,
Is
of
it,
course.
is it your sense that the fees or the, whatever, the fees, the revenue coming in will take care of this.
Yes, sir, and I can get you, how about this? If you're comfortable with us pursuing it, I'll talk to one of the consultants I have in mind. I'll get a proposal. I'll have actual numbers, and then I'll get Dina to run numbers again, and we'll get back with you.
Cool. And while you're on that,
Uh-huh.
what's your turnaround? Are we still out 3 months?
For,
Building permits.
Residential permits.
yes, and the bigger backlog is frankly implementing, or excuse me, placing the new proposals into the system. The permit techs are the ones that do that work. You saw an email from me about that. It's hard. I mean, we've hired a person, but that person won't start for another 2 weeks. There's always a learning curve. And we have a person going on FEMLA for 6 weeks. My guess is we're going to have another 2 or 3 months of it taking a full month just to get the new plans into our system. So you tack that on to 12 weeks, and no wonder people are calling every day.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't have another solution right now.
Okay, so you just get us some numbers?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In general, are we okay with what David is proposing, if the numbers make sense? Okay. You've got direction.
Thank you.
Okay. Second item, final item, consideration of Cooper Code Enforcement Action. This is an action item. And David, are you looking for an executive session?
Yes, sir, and I should actually end Zoom if you go there. But I can't end Zoom. Let me make sure everyone but staff is off of it, because Pat is going to weigh in by Zoom.
Okay,
Yeah,
understood.
well, Pat we can call him.
That's true. Pat, would you rather call in or?
Yeah. That's fine. If you guys call me on, I have my phone right here. I'll just switch my headphones and we can go to executive session.
Okay, so we'll call you.
In that case, I'm going to end Zoom.
Please.
Goodbye.
But this is not working, so,
Do we have a cell phone?
well, I think.
I have mine.
You have yours? What's Pat's number?
446
208.
Okay, hold on, let me get there. Okay, 208.
446.
9575.
So you're okay, time-wise?
Yeah. A few minutes.
Hey, Pat, Bill Brooks. Hold on, you're on speakerphone now.
Okay.
All right, then I move we enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061F.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan.
Aye.
Chair Philios.
Aye, entering into The time is now 10:29. We are about to exit executive session. Motion?
I move we exit executive session with staff to proceed as discussed.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan.
Aye.
Chair Philios.
Aye. Time is now 10:30. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Pat.